Okay, we're going to call the meeting of the Personnel Administrative Affairs Committee to order. Today is Tuesday, September 3rd, 2024. It is 7 p.m. and we are in the Aldermanic Chamber. Could the clerk please call the roll?
Alderwoman at Large Shoshana Kelly, Chairwoman.
I am here.
Alderman at Large Ben Clemens, Vice Chair.
Here.
Alderman Thomas Lopez. Alderman Tim Sennett is here. Alderman Ernest Jetty. All right, and we have 3 in attendance.
Also in attendance.
Also in attendance, we have Tim Cummings, Administrative Services Director, Nancy Trask, Human Resource Manager, Lizzie Gouveia, Senior Human Resource Specialist, Rachel Skaggs, David Fredette, Jane Marquis, Alderman Klee, and Alderman at Large Wilshire.
And the mayor is also with us.
And Mayor Donches.
All right, we'll start with public comment. Is there anyone from the public who would like to give testimony this evening? Seeing none, we have been asked if the committee would be willing to suspend the rules and do our interviews first. Is there any objections from the committee? Okay. Why don't you go ahead
Yep.
and...
So first up, for the Board of Public Works Retirement System Trustees, we have David Fredette, new appointment with a term to expire December 31st, 2025, 4 Henry Drive, number 408, Nashua, New Hampshire, 03062.
Mr. Mayor?
Well, thank you very much, Madam Chair. So for the Board of the BPW Retirement Fund, I've appointed David Fredette, familiar to everyone, I think. I don't know, I believe everyone knows him. He was, of course, city treasurer, tax collector, and has held many other positions with the city, and is currently treasurer and has been for some time for the county of Hillsborough. In his role as treasurer tax collector, he was very involved with the pension fund, and one of the people retired, so David seemed a perfect fit. He was willing to serve. It's nice of him. So I've nominated him, and I think obviously he's a great fit and will do a great job. Has a lot of financial knowledge, which would contribute to the direction of the funds. And there is an investment manager, but the board works with the investment manager to just guide the fund. So with that, I will give you David Fredette, who will maybe tell you a little bit about himself. I don't know if there's anything you don't know already, and will tell you of his interest in being on the board.
Mr. Fredette?
Okay, thank you, Mr. Mayor. As he said, all of you know me. I have served on that board actually almost my entire time with the city, from 1994 through 2021 in different aspects. I was actually, when I was on the Board of Aldermen, I was a member of the committee. I was chairman at that time. And then as treasurer, I participated at all their meetings. My office was responsible for, at that time, we actually did the pension calculations ourselves, and the payroll department did the submittal of the monthly or weekly checks. They used to get paid weekly. The current financial group that invests the money was a group selected when I was the treasurer. We went through an RFP process, and they've done very well for the fund. I'm very familiar with it. I understand how it works and how important it is to our public works employees. It's a unique, the city of Manchester has a similar plan, larger, but I'm very familiar with it, and I want to help to ensure that it's around for a long time for our employees.
Thank you very much. Questions from the committee or Alderman? Alderman Clemens and Alderman Wilshire.
Thank you, Madam Chair. I just want to say, I think great great fit for the role, Mr. Mayor, and Mr. Fredette, you have my full support. Your reputation precedes you, and I know that you'll be good for this, so, thank you.
Thank you.
Great. Alderman Wilshire?
Thank you for stepping up to do this again.
Yep.
Of course, I don't have any questions, because I know you are a consummate professional, and that all of this will just be easy for you. So, thank you for that.
Thank you.
Any additional
Other
comments?
questions?
I'll also just say thank you, and, we've interviewed you a number of times in this chamber.
Yeah.
Great to have you back. I know you'll be an asset to this board.
Okay.
And we'll take up your nomination in a bit,
Is that it?
unless you want to say something more.
No, I think I'll. You have other things on your agenda, but thank you very much.
Yeah.
Thank you.
All right, next up for Nashua Arts Commission, we have Jane Marquis, new appointment with a term to expire September 11, 2027, 4 Farley Street, Nashua, New Hampshire, 03064.
And Mr. Mayor, if you'd like to introduce us to Jane, please.
All right, thank you, Madam Chair. Well, this is Jane Markey, who I've nominated to be on the Arts Commission. Ms. Markey has been employed by the Nashua Adult Learning Center for many years, 31 years, and during that entire time has been engaged with early childhood and child education. She has a lot of experience in that area and a degree, and if you look at her resume, it's just filled with the experience that she's had with childhood education. And what Lindsay Rinaldi, who is the chair of the Arts Commission, approached Jane and asked if she might be interested in serving on the Arts Commission because they would like to consider how the arts could benefit the children of Nashua. And Ms. Markey has been dreaming of for many years. Alderwoman Klee probably knows about this, but has been dreaming for many years of trying to establish a children's museum, which could benefit children, and has thought a lot about arts programs that could enrich the children of our community. With that, and therefore I think she's a great fit, and I wanted to introduce you to Ms. Markey and ask her to say a little bit more about her career and of her interest in the Nashua Arts Commission.
Thank you. Thank you, Mayor Donches. Good evening, everyone. Thank you for having me. I am very excited to be nominated for this position. I am a native Nashuan. I am very dedicated to our community. I have worked for 31 years at the Nashua Adult Learning Center, and I've worked with early care and education, done a lot of work with family support, teach other teachers, that kind of thing. And I've always been active in the community. I am a member of the Nashua Rotary Club. I've chaired many directors' networks in our field, and I'm really very passionate about what's available and what's good and what's right and what's happening in our community for young children and their families. And often there are so many barriers for young families to participate in activities and things that happen, or lessons that children could take, or joining sports teams or whatnot. Often there's some financial barriers or challenges there. And I feel that in talking with the other commissioners on the Arts Commission, that they were really looking at how to infuse more programs for children and young children, school-age children as well, and families, and also to have more collaboration with the nonprofit world. In our community, I'm much more connected to the nonprofit sector than any other. It's just the way it goes. Even Lindsay Rinaldi from the community school, her music therapists come and provide services to our children and families at the center. So there's always been so much overlap in our city and so much happening throughout the agencies and the communities. And there's a lot of young families, not just the ones I see each day at the Adult Learning Center, but in so many programs in Nashua, and of course the public schools. So I really am so excited to be able to be in a position where I can create, which I love to do. I can be a team member, which I like to be a member of a team, and really hopefully make an impact in a positive way for the arts and culture of our city and promote it as something that would be here 10, 20, 30, 50 years from now, things that could be really worthwhile for children and families. And that's my vantage point, if you will.
Great. Okay, Ally will take questions or comments from the board. Alderman Clegg.
Thank you, Madam Chairwoman. Thank you for stepping up. I'd like to see the Arts Commission branch out in more than just music and art in general. I think Ms. Rinaldi, her community school, music school, is amazing. I mean, this summer she did her at Greeley Park. She had her children's workshop, and they did all kinds of things at Greeley Park. It was just absolutely amazing, some of the things that she did. But your program, I can see how it will branch out too, and be able to do so much more. And part of the Arts Commission also is a lot of the grants. So I can see how you will be able to help work with and apply for grants and be able to put them in a different direction too, that would help. How do you see being able to support that kind of a need? Have you thought about anything like that?
Yes, thank you, Alderman Clee. When I did my initial interview, I was, asking commissioners, how do you get funded? What does happen? And like most nonprofits, it's through grant money, soft money, if you will. I have a lot of experience in even formal education in writing grants. And I have a pretty good success rate too in achieving them, which is a good thing. And I know that's a major part, but it's all about connections and relationships and being clear about your message, what it is you're offering and what you hope to gain, what you really want for your programs or for the commission. What does Nashua really want? What does Nashua really need? You have to ask who's out there, what's happening, and then you go looking for the funding. And you don't miss an opportunity.
Thank you.
Alderman Senate.
Thank you, Madam Chair. I don't really have much in the way of a question, but just a couple of comments. First off, thank you for stepping forward to take on this position, and thank you for your energy. I often find that you can tell a lot about a person and their passion for a specific topic, just the way that they speak about it. And just listening to you in the last 5 minutes talk about this, it's very evident that this is a lifelong passion of yours, so I really appreciate that energy. And just a couple things that I found notable from your background. I'm the father of a 9-year-old son, and I really like your targeted direction of making the arts available to children, young children, school-age children, because too often when we hear about potential cuts in the school district, we all know it's the arts that are the first to go. I don't think a year goes by where we don't hear, if not here, then somewhere else in the world, about arts programs, music programs being cut in the schools. And as a former band geek, that really bothers me, because that is basically what kept me in high school. So having people like you out in our community who are dedicated to providing those opportunities for children means a lot to me. And I also, geez, if we could get back to pushing the way it seems like you pushed for the Children's Museum in Nashua. I only just now, for the first time in his 9 years, took my son to the Boston Children's Museum about 2 or 3 weeks ago. And I often feel like maybe sometimes the children's museums of today get lost in the allure of STEM. And that's not to discredit STEM, because that's, a very important aspect of childhood development. But for as much science and technology as he was exposed to there that day, he was exposed to art and expressing himself through drawings and performing, and he just ate it up. So if we could have something like that back in our community, I think it would be a real boon to the city of Nashua. So thank you for your passion, thank you for your energy, and I look forward to supporting your nomination.
Well, thank you for saying that. I appreciate it.
Alderman Wilshire.
Thank you. Nice to see you, Jane.
You too,
You and I
Lori.
started our
Alderman Lori.
nonprofit jobs the same year, I believe. So
Yes,
kudos to you for hanging in there that long. That's
thanks.
You do great work. it's obvious from your resume, from just your words. I think you'll be terrific on the Arts Commission, so thank you for your willingness to do that.
Well, thank you, and thank you to all of you for having me again, but also being open to hearing about an eventual establishment of a children's museum, because it's not just for children. It's for families, it's for community, when you follow the right model and have the right design. Mayor Donchis will be having town hall meetings there. There'll be all kinds of things that you can feature. It becomes a real hub of a community for in so many ways. So, thank you for listening.
It's so funny, I actually had, I don't know that we've ever talked about this, but I've also
I think
felt
we
that
have,
way.
Shoshana, at one of the fundraisers Madam Chair, I'm
No,
sorry.
no, you're fine. Because I've also been very passionate about that, because I think now that we have the Arts Center and all these things, we have to start drawing people to stay for longer. And the Children's Museum's a great way of, hey, I'm gonna come in the afternoon, and then maybe I'll take in a show. I was also on the board of the symphony, and I pushed a lot about, can we do family concerts? And it was always, financially a harder thing to do. But I didn't care. I brought my kids. My son just turns 5 in 2 days, and I took him to the full-on shows, and he stayed for whatever he could.
It's so important, it
it's
really
so
is.
important.
Like, you were saying, Mr. Senate, I'm sorry, I don't put my glasses on, but it's not just STEM, it's not just math and science, it's creative expression, it's arts, it's all kinds of areas of development. But I just feel that a museum in our community would go a long way and hopefully last a really long time. It could really have such a positive impact. And if I had my way, if you came to the museum, either you didn't have to pay, or maybe you stuck $1 in a jar somewhere or something, but it would be, very low cost and that kind of thing. I just think our community is ripe for it and really needs it for our children and families. But that's not the only reason I want to be on the Arts Commission. That was just a thought when I was talking to Lindsay. She's like, oh, Jane, that's a great idea. So that's how it all kind of came out again.
Well, your passion is palatable
Oh,
and
well,
palpable.
thanks.
That's the word I'm looking for. Palpable. I'll get there today.
Well, thank you.
Thank you. And we'll be taking up your nomination in a bit.
Okay.
And that's it for on nominations tonight, right? Mayor?
Is that what that is?
That's it, yes. Thank you, Madam Chair.
Okay.
Great, thank you. Okay. No, we have to go back to presentations.
Oh, you're right, you get that.
I wrote it out so I don't get it wrong this time. All right, so we're gonna go back in the order here to presentations. And we have in front of us a discussion on the compensation study. I believe, Mr. Cummings, you have a number of people with you to do a
I do.
presentation?
Would you like us to sit around the horseshoe?
Yeah, you can come in.
So again, for the record, Tim Cummings, Director of Administrative Services. If I could have Nancy Trask and Lizzie Govea join me up here at the horseshoe. For those of you who didn't get the handout, just to make sure that you have one. I have extras if need be.
Do we need to share the screen on this?
Yep, we will need to share screen.
Okay.
But before you do that, let me just ask our consultant, so with us? Yep, thank you. So, again, for the record, Tim Cummings, Director of Administrative Services. Joining me up here in the horseshoe, we have Nancy Trask, Human Resources Manager, and Lizzie Govea, Senior Human Resources Specialist. And they've been working diligently on this updated classification and compensation study. Joining us remotely is our consultant, Rachel, from GOV, which is now known as MGT. She will be walking us through in more detail on the methodology for the classification study and then some details on the comparable communities. If you recall, I was before you at your August meeting with a memo where I started the conversation with you all to talk about how we were going about this classification and compensation study. During that conversation, some great feedback came to us. We were able to update some of the things that we were doing. We'll get into that in a little bit, in a few minutes here, based off of your initial feedback. But one of the comments at the meeting from last month was it would be great to have the consultant come in and take a little bit deeper of a dive on how the classification study got developed and basically the 9 various factors that are used that helped the grouping and classification of our unaffiliated employees, and then a little bit more detail relative to the comparable communities and how we arrived at the various comps. Ultimately, my goal is to walk away with some sort of agreement on both the methodology and the comparable communities used, as I would like to use that as a baseline moving forward, so we can have a benchmark to compare ourselves against other communities as the cases arise in the future. And that's one of my policy goals, that I'm not saying we have to get there this evening, but at some point at the end of this exercise, it would be good if this body came together and agreed that the comparable communities that we are using to evaluate our salaries and other compensation type benefits are the comps that we're in agreement with. So with that being said, Madam Chair, Rachel is here. And I just ask her if she wants to share her slide deck, if she has it readily available. If not, and we have it up at the front as well.
I have it, so I can share if that's okay.
I believe permission may need to be granted.
I think I can.
Yep, there you go. Yep, there you go.
Okay. Oh, I'm getting some echo. 1 second. Okay. I can still hear myself echoing, but if it's okay with you guys, I can maybe turn my volume down.
Yeah, we're not receiving an echo in here, so.
Okay. All right. I'll try to not let it distract me. I don't know if. Maybe because there's two. I have like two of the chamber things are showing up. Maybe one needs to be muted.
Yes.
Okay.
I don't know if we'll be able to be heard.
Okay. Oh, that sounds better. Can you hear me okay?
Yep.
We can hear you. Can you hear us?
Oh, now I can't hear you.
Yeah.
Oh, boy. Well, for a moment. we did.
Sorry, I'm not able to hear you.
You gotta just click add to unmute or ask to.
He has to do that there.
I think so.
Yeah, because if you mute them, then I think the world out there can't hear.
Well, yeah, she can't hear us either, so.
No, but I mean, I think the TV world can't hear either.
Fun times.
Oh, now we're undermuted.
We're unmuted.
Okay. Can you hear me okay?
We can hear you, yep.
It should be awesome, yeah.
Yeah, we're good.
Okay, awesome. So sorry about that. I always get distracted when my voice is echoing behind. Let me share my screen and then we can get started. Okay, you can see the screen now too?
Yes.
Awesome. Okay, good evening. Sorry about that. Thank you so much. My name is Rachel Skaggs. I am a classification and compensation project manager with formerly GovHR, but now referred to as MGT, and I have been with the company for 5 years. Prior to working with GovHR and MGT, I spent 10 years in local government management, most recently as the city manager for a city called Princeton, Illinois. And prior to that, I worked in the Chicago suburbs. So really excited to be going through this process and to be present with you tonight to talk about kind of where we are so far and some of the things we have going on. I will go through this presentation and feel free if you have any issues hearing me or have any questions, you can stop me. And then of course, we'll have plenty of time for questions and discussion at the end. I'll talk a little bit about the scope of work, what's entailed in the entire study, and then I'll focus a lot on the comparable communities and how those have been established. I'll go through the job evaluation and kind of the tool and the process that we've used for the job evaluation analysis, and how that really leads to our proposed classification plan, and then we'll have time for questions. So the entire project really has kind of, well, multiple different components, but I kind of say two key components. So the first thing that we do is the study preparation and project meeting. So have a meeting to go over things, look at all of the documents that we need, and really get familiar with how the compensation practices are within the city. And then we look at determining a group of comparable entities, which we'll talk about tonight. We had an employee kickoff meeting with employees to go through the process and explain to them how we want them to fill out that job analysis questionnaire, which allows us to conduct the job evaluation and then put together that classification plan. So that's kind of the internal equity piece, the job evaluation and the classification plan. And then we have this external component, which is, you know, establishing those comparable communities and then conducting a market survey and reviewing and analyzing those responses from those comparable communities. Eventually, we'll put together a full draft report that will kind of highlight everything from the very beginning all the way through to the end, make a presentation on that, and then after which everything will be finalized. So an important component in any market survey or compensation study is really to establish a group of comparable entities. We do a lot of studies in a lot of different states, and we always try to use criteria in it's state by state that we can really evaluate financially what communities have a similar ability to pay. We also take into consideration though market competitiveness and things like that. So we start with an initial screen. So we looked at communities in New Hampshire, Maine, Massachusetts, Connecticut, Rhode Island, and Vermont with populations between around 62,000 and 190,000. So that was kind of the initial screen. So we took all the communities that fit that. And then we looked at these 5 criteria. We looked at population, per capita income, full-time payroll, number of full-time employees, and total expenditures. Again, most of these obviously focus on financials kind of, and then population as well. So the closer a community is to matching Nashua for each of these criteria, the more points they're gonna receive. So if someone, or if some community is really close to your population, they're gonna receive the maximum points, which I can pull that up in a second. I think it's 20 or 25. And then the farther out they are, the less points they're gonna receive. So our philosophy is always a community that receives the most points is the most comparable based on those criteria. So from there was quite a few communities that scored 95 or more points. The most points a community can score is 100, so 95 or above is great. And these are the entities that scored 95 or more points using those criteria. So you'll see we got a handful in different states, but these are the entities and communities that we determined to be the most comparable to Nashua based on those criteria that we used.
So I'm going to just insert myself right here to say that during our last conversation last month, there was a suggestion that we look at Wallet Hub, best places to live, safest cities. And so we took that, we evaluated that. Some of those communities that are comparable are on this list. And some that weren't comparable to us, obviously, there's a discussion as to whether we want to really look at those as part of a benchmark. Boise, Idaho, as an example. And so what Rachel suggested, and this is a conversation point to be had at a later date, is instead of us judging ourselves on our pay from a 50th percentile, we could look at maybe setting a benchmark at 55, 60, 65 type percentile, basically signaling to the market that we want to pay a little bit more to maintain our standing and try to achieve basically what Wallet Hub and best places to raise a family, all those other superlatives, if you will, have identified us for. So there is two ways to get to the same end goal. And again, at the end of this exercise, I am hopeful that we will hear from you all as to where we should actually bogey our compensation. Sorry, thank you, Rachel.
Yeah, no, great point, thank you. And that's definitely a discussion that is important to have, like where you want to be in terms of a pay, I call it a pay philosophy. So, the 50th percentile, when we get there, that's kind of the market, but we have some clients that, want to be above market to maintain, that they, how they compensate their employees and what that message says. So looking at different percentiles is definitely a conversation that we'll want to have. So these are the comparable entities. When I'm done with the PowerPoint slide, I can pull up the actual analysis so you can see how each of these communities scored. So those comparable communities were established, and then we really start focusing on the job evaluation component. And this, in my opinion, is one of the most important components of any study because, job titles can be the same for every different city, but how they function in your city and how those positions function can be different, right? So really looking and understanding and make sure we know how the positions function in Nashua is really important, and this is how we did that. So we evaluated around 127 positions, and we used these 9 job factors that are listed below to establish internal equity. So we look at education. What's the required preparation and training needed to do the job? What type of previous work experience? How many years of prior work experience are needed to do the job? And one other thing I wanted to mention too is we look at everything based on the position, not the person in this position. I have the sun shining in right on me, so it's making a weird reflection. I apologize about that. So we really focus on what is required of the position. We look at decision-making and independent judgment. So how much decision-making on a daily basis does that position have, and what is their independent judgment? If they made a bad decision, what would that cause minor issues? Would it be more serious, more critical? So we look at that. We look at their responsibility for policy development. This is also interpretation and explanation of policies, along with a position that might provide input to their supervisor on policies or procedures that need to be developed. We look at planning of work. Are they planning their own work and working independently? Are they a supervisor where they have to plan their work and the work of others? Are they more of a department head or a department manager where they're managing a lot of different people and projects and so on? We look at their contact with others, and this is both contact internally with people, inside the city, as well as external contacts, and that can be, different governmental entities, school districts, vendors, businesses. We look at all of the external contacts and communications that they're having. We look at the work of others, so if they are a supervisor, how many direct and indirect employees are they supervising? We look at their working conditions, so hazardous, unpleasant conditions, physically demanding jobs, and what that looks like. And then we look at their use of technology or specialized equipment. So specialized equipment could be, operating any public works types equipment, and then technology if they're a super user of a specific program or software, or maybe they're overall administrator of an IT program. So those are the 9 job factors that we look at for each position. So every employee is evaluated based on kind of these 4 things. So we look at the job description. The employee completes the job analysis questionnaire, which basically asks the questions relating to these 9 job factors. Supervisors reviewed those, but we do not let supervisors make any changes to what their employees have filled out. They can just provide comments if they have any. And then we at MGT conducted a virtual interview with at least 1 employee in each position. And the reason for that interview is really to expand upon the information and just to get a better understanding of their position and what their job does within the city. So based on those kind of 4 things, every position is assigned a numerical value, and that is what leads to the classification plan and really puts together that internal equity, meaning how positions relate to one another. We have put together a classification plan that consists around 15 grades, so starting at grade 1 and going up to grade 15. And then there's a 30-point spread in between each of those skill levels, which is where the points break to make a new grade. So for instance, grade 1 goes up to 285, grade 2 is 290 to 320, and so on. And so all of the positions based on those 4 things I went over fall into these skill levels and grades based on their job factor analysis score. So the total score from those 9 job factors after looking at the job description, the JAQ, and the employee interview. So some of the next steps as we move forward. So once the classification plan is finalized and completed, we'll begin to incorporate all that external market data gathered from those comparable communities. We also partner with salary.com and use their tool called Comp Analyst, which allows us to look at a region based on either budget or full-time employees and really narrow in on certain positions, both in the private sector and the public sector. So we can pull some of that data as well. And all of that data will be used to develop pay ranges for those 15 grades. And then the final classification and compensation plan will be presented, and we'll at that time also share our recommendations for implementation of that plan as well. So I'll stop right there for a second. I'm happy to answer any questions. And like I said, I'll pull up that comparable community analysis to walk through that a little bit more too.
Rachel, if you could, you use this term 3 times, and so I'm hoping you might be able to put a little definition around it, but you
Yeah.
use the phrase internal equity. And so
I knew you.
Yeah, could you explain that a little bit for
Yeah,
everyone?
absolutely. I knew that was going to be the word you were going to bring up because I use that phrase a lot. So internal equity really means, how positions compare to one another within Nashua, and we want to make sure they're treated the same. So internal equity meaning, like pay equity, fairness in how the positions are ranked and put together within the classification plan. So our job factor analysis system covers all of those equity issues that you might face because it covers those 9 job factors, and all of those positions fall within that. So it creates that internal equity because positions are being ranked based on the same criteria, the same process, and again, only looking at the position, not the person in the position. So what are the requirements of the position?
Alderman Clemmons?
Yeah, I just have a quick question. So, and just to clarify, this was only done for the merit employees and non-union.
That is correct.
Okay.
All we studied was the unaffiliated population at this time.
Okay.
Is that your question?
Yes, that was my question.
I have a question, so I just wanted to say. Can we bring the comparables up? Because I know that was Alderman Clemmons' question. And it sounds like that's our goal, is to come away with, I don't know how many you're hoping to have.
Well, yeah, so you can see, it's on the memo, but there might be a slide that kind of shows the
Slide?
comparable communities.
There
So I can walk through this real quick. Sorry, not to make you dizzy scrolling here. So as I was kind of mentioning in the presentation, so we look at, you'll see these 5 criteria. Nashua's, population is here, and then we say 1.5 times more or less than that. So if a community that met that initial screening criteria fell within 1.5 times more or less than Nashua for any of these, they would receive the maximum number of 20 points. The farther away they get from matching, the less points they receive. So if they fell 2.5 times, or 2 times on either end of your population, they would receive 15 points and so on. Same thing for per capita income, full-time payroll, number of full-time employees, and total expenditures. From there, this next page here shows all the communities that met that initial screen. So you'll see some scored lower because they are farther away or got less points based on those criteria. The ones at the top here scored higher. You'll see there's a bunch of 100s and some 95s. So those are the entities that we looked at as being the most comparable. Typically, we like to choose anywhere between, there's no set number of comparable communities you need to have, but we like to say between 12 to 20 is a good amount or a good number of comparable entities. So we looked and these are the ones that had 95 points or more, but then we also added in a few more that have been, maybe used as comparables in the past or close in proximity, or sorry, our competitors in the marketplace or close in proximity. So this was the list that we had recommended be used as comparables for the study.
So my question, methodology makes sense to me, but my question was around, you actually almost touched on it, attrition, and whether that is part of this in terms of who is the city losing talent to?
Yeah, so I think that's part of the reason why these three were added, but I think another component of that, and Tim kind of mentioned it earlier, is determining what you want your pay percentile to be. So it's important to evaluate yourself and compare yourself against communities that have a similar ability to pay or that might be competitors in the marketplace because, they're next door or close in proximity. And then when we talk about pay philosophy, if the 50th percentile is the median. So if we, recommend a pay plan for you that's right, at the median, 50% of those communities are paying more, 50% are paying less. I think what would help with, recruitment, retention, and all of those issues is looking at if it's possible to be a payer at, the 60th or 65th percentile, because then it holds you a little bit above market and you're able to, recruit and retain much easier and not have to lose employees or retrain them that way. So I think that's a great question, and we kind of incorporated it here, but the second component would be looking at that pay percentile.
Do you have a recommendation on the lowest amount of points that should be put into the study? Do you understand, like, the lowest score is the question I'm asking. If I could be more clear.
Like for the top comparables, is that what you're asking?
Yeah, because like you have Portsmouth
Yeah.
at 50, and that's the lowest. But we have.
Yeah, so and those three were added, they scored less than 95, but were added because of their proximity or being competitors in the marketplace. I think 50 or above is fine. I don't really have a cutoff. I would probably question, if you wanted to add someone with less than that. I'm missing a page here, I think. Oh, yeah, no, they didn't meet the initial screen and we ran them through. I thought I was missing a page, but I'm not. So, there's really no point minimum, I guess I would say. I mean, I would probably question if you wanted to add, a community in that had a population of like 10,000 or something. But if there's justification on why they should be added, that's okay.
If I could, just some of the rationale behind adding these particular communities in is because we wanted to have more New Hampshire-specific municipalities. I was very sensitive to the fact that you could make an argument that that even though it was based on data, the data is because Nashua is a market leader, and because we are so much more advanced than a lot of our municipalities around us. Really, besides Manchester, there's few other comps for us. But that's also maybe not necessarily fair if you were to study the marketplace. And would it be unrealistic for someone to go from Nashua to Portsmouth? No. I think you could see one of our employees do that, and vice versa. I do think you have employees who live in the Londonderry area who could very much look at Portsmouth and or Nashua as employers. And so that's why we want to include those additional communities in this set.
Alderman Clevens, sorry.
Yeah, so
my nose in the data.
part of this, part of this data I see is per capita income. Do we look at the housing cost at all?
Good question.
Yes, so we didn't in this case. We typically look at per capita income. We could probably pull in median household income to see if that changes anything.
Alderman Clevens, go ahead.
Yeah, because I think right now, I mean, the whole country is in a housing crisis, and one of the things that I think any employer has to do is look to see if what they're paying, if they're paying their employees enough that they could live in the community in which they work.
So to that point, Alderman Clemmons, I completely agree with you and understand where you're going with this. I'm not necessarily sure we want to do that with the comparables here, but when we're having a conversation about our salaries and setting our salary philosophy, I think a good data metric to use is specifically Nashua, but then the regional housing market. What is the median sale price? And then could an employee afford to buy a median household, a median sold home in this marketplace is, I think, a great analysis for us to do, to kind of get to the point that you're talking about.
Alderman Clevens, did you?
Yeah, I guess the only reason that I bring that up is because we have, New England is small, New Hampshire, Massachusetts, we can pull from a lot of places, talent. So you want to make sure that what we're offering up here, we can get the best talent. But if you could have the best position working for the best city in the country, if you can't find a place to live, you're not going to go there, right? So we have to make it worth people's while, I think, to not only want to come here from somewhere else, but to stay in Nashua too. And so I think that needs to be a factor somewhere along the lines of what we're doing, because ultimately that is going to be in my opinion, that is the number one, or it's at least in the top two factors of whether or not you're going to take a job, right?
Agreed, yeah. No, again, if I may, Madam Chair, I think during the salary philosophy conversation, what we can do is we can have that type of analysis done, and I use the example of a for sale, but it could be even rental. You know, what is, based on the median rents of a 1 or 2 bedroom in the marketplace, what is the income you'd need to make? And we all know federal definition is we shouldn't be spending more than 1/3 of our income on our house. And so we could look to see if we're an adequate payer from that perspective.
I had a question that was somewhat, are you all set? Somewhat connected here because I wanted to know about additional compensation factors, because I see some towns on here like a Newton or Brookline, where people can get insurance from the state or those types of things. So how do we factor those in or out when you're comparing?
Yeah, that's a good point.
Oh, yeah,
Go ahead.
Rachel. Yeah, no, go ahead, Rachel.
So I think, I was just gonna say, I think that's a great question. We really focus on base pay. So benefits and anything is kind of beyond that, and we didn't look at benefits, but it's important to take that into consideration when we have that pay philosophy discussion and where you want to be, if you know some of these other benefits that are provided elsewhere. But really looking at, what the base pay for these positions is what's representative of what the market is paying for those. So that's, without benefits, what is the market paying for those positions?
Alderman Clemmons and then Alderman Clay. I'm sorry, I couldn't see your hand. That's okay.
Yeah,
Just now.
but Madam Chair, that's a very good point. And again, that's something that needs to be looked at too, because, the benefits package that the city can offer here is going to be a lot different than any community in Massachusetts, because Massachusetts has paid family leave. So, I think we need to look at things like that as well, and how we're, are we going to compete with Lowell, in other words, right? Because that's something that we have to factor in.
So if I may, Madam Chair.
Director
I mean,
Cummings.
and it's one of the reasons why I made it clear in the cover memo that we did not study that. It was beyond the scope of this particular deliverable and project, but we can absolutely do that. May add a little time to this particular project, But it's something that if the body and the group wants us to do, I think it would be good so we could get to a total compensation type conversation, which is, I think, where you're ultimately going. But when we originally started this, it was really a conversation based on input that we were getting from employees about the salary and the pay. And so that's why we initially started the project.
And I think that makes sense, and I mean, we're asking questions because we have a very unique package, and things come down to the city when we pay for our own, we're self-insured. We've got the pension thing going on, and anyone who's gone out and looked for a job in the last, 15 years knows that the benefits is part of it, and your base pay is gonna go a lot further if someone's already covering your insurance or your housing costs are lower. So I think it's important that we keep in mind those factors, because the numbers themselves aren't gonna tell the whole story. Alderman Clee?
No, I'm glad to hear all this. I kind of held back to hear all this. When I worked for the federal government, one of the issues that we had, when I was working for the Department of Veterans Affairs, we were having some recruitment issues, so we became very creative. We were having problems recruiting nurses, so we became very creative. We created this, what we called the 24/7 type of program. So over the weekend, we created kind of a 24, we called it the 24 shift. They didn't work 24 hours, but they worked like 2 12-hour shifts, and it was night differential and so on, and it kind of gave them 40 hours by working 24 hours, and they got a 40-hour paycheck by working this. We created a differential of working in Massachusetts. We had people that came from Maine that actually paid the Massachusetts taxes. They had to pay the Maine tax, but Maine was a little higher, so they got the tax credit from Massachusetts and did that. They came from Saco and so on. So those are some of the things we had to get creative in order to be able to hire people. And they started pulling actually from the Manchester VA, so they kind of worked and did. So we got creative with pay scales, so I understand that. I'm afraid that we're going to go down a slippery slope if we start looking at, what is the pay scale of rent. They just did a survey that actually showed in New Hampshire the cost of rent is gotten higher than trying to buy a home. So I don't want to dig a hole so deep that we don't get to somewhere with this document. Just kind of putting that out. This is great information that we have here, and I think we need to get somewhere. The one thing that I don't see here, and maybe it's just because their numbers are so low, I see nothing coming from Western New Hampshire, looking at Peterborough, Keene, or Vermont. And my question to that is it because the numbers are so comparatively low to the southeast portion of New Hampshire? Is that the case? I see that you have like Springfield, Mass. Obviously, it's only in the 60% as far as the total points are concerned, which is possibly something we don't really want to look at. But so when we're looking at New Hampshire in general, truly the only New Hampshire thing I see here is Manchester being comparable, and that's like kind of 100. Is that correct? The score was that?
Mm-hmm.
So may I
Put that
ask?
back up while we're talking. Do you mind?
Rachel, could you put the,
Yeah.
okay, thanks.
Sorry, I should, trying to follow along.
You-
Thank you.
You're good. Oh, wrong one. Hang on. That's not what you want to see. That's their client. 1 second. Too many things open. There we go.
I mean, I know like Keene and Peterborough and so on like that are probably just kind of college and probably don't fall within our.
I think most of the ones you're mentioning, and I can go back and look, didn't meet that initial screen.
Probably, that's what I
And
figured, yeah.
so they're not on there. Yeah.
Okay.
So the data showed that they would have been below the 50th
present how, yeah,
And,
yeah.
I mean, I think you could argue Keene, if you wanted to. I mean, I don't know where it falls on the ranking, but, I mean, more to the point, this kind of just gives you a sampling of what the market is. You know, and that's, I mean, that's really all this was trying to do. We could definitely look at adding Keene. We also didn't include Burlington, Vermont.
Right.
I mean, again, that could, I mean, I don't know where Burlington and
So-
Vermont falls on this, but, I mean, that's something we could look at.
Madam Chairman,
Alderman Clegg?
so my argument would be, to that point, is if we don't, if our salaries are higher to that, the point that I was making with the VA, that we were able to pull someone from Saco to Bedford, Massachusetts, is it possible that we could pull talent from that area of the state?
We do.
We do.
Yeah, we do. I think it's pretty fair to say that, and the Human Resources team is here, and I shouldn't be speaking for them, but we are the market leader, and so what we inevitably tend to see is a lot of the surrounding communities, smaller communities in particular, a year or two or three, or whatever the case may be, and then they do come to Nashua at some point if they're in a certain reasonable drive time. I think the best example we can give you, and I'll say this out loud, and I hope it doesn't come back to me, but Concord, New Hampshire, I think is a great stop for an employee before they make their way here to Nashua. We have seen time and time again, wonderful employees from Concord, New Hampshire, and then if they're willing to make the drive, we tend to then see them gravitate towards Nashua.
Again, may I?
Alderman Clegg.
Okay, so while I would want to hope that the people who work here would want to live here, but to the point of, to those that we're talking about the cost of rent and so on, I don't want to build that into the pay that we're necessarily giving. Let's try to pull from the outside communities, at least as a start. Does that make sense?
What do you mean by that?
When if I was hearing properly, we were talking about the cost of the rent and so on within the local communities and potentially trying to build that when we were talking about how much would that cost be when we're trying to build this pay scale and so on. Someone was asking you, does these points and does this cost and so on build that into here?
Let me tell you a little bit about what I was envisioning.
Okay.
Just to kind of,
Yes.
again, I think it's data, and more to the point, it's a conversation as to, are we comfortable with who we're comparing ourselves to? And so, I would suggest that we would look at it and study rent and/or ownership for a median household sale in Waltham, Massachusetts is X amount of dollars. And then we would look at our pay range, and we would see if a pay range could cover in that housing market. We would do that for Nashua, we would do that for a reasonable driving distance around us, but really the comparable communities, because that's who we're saying, you know, we're trying to emulate. And then it would just be more like a go, no-go type of assessment. Yes, we are relatively paying someone so they can afford housing. Question whether there is any housing is a different one.
Got it.
But that's kind of how I think we could make that assessment. And I think it gets to Alderman Clemens' point of like, you need to be paying someone enough so that they can have a place to live, ideally in Nashua or in the surrounding community, as closest to their work as possible. But let's be realistic to the marketplace.
Got it. Okay, thank you.
Alderman Clemens?
Yeah, that is exactly it. You want somebody to have pride in their job, and we do. Our employees are the best. But you can't get that out of somebody who you offer them a job or they take a job and they work for the city and then they drive out of it every night to go home somewhere else. That's not what we want. What we want is them to be able to stay here and live here. That should be our goal. Whether we get there or not, might not happen overnight. Maybe we're already there, I don't know. But the point is that we want to see that, and that should always be our goal.
Agreed. And I would say that's more also from a sustainability standpoint, take up less carbon footprint, less usage of wear and tear on roads. The closer we can get people to work and live in a closer proximity is a goal we should absolutely strive for.
Any additional comments or questions?
Was this helpful?
Yes.
Very.
Any major objections to the comparable communities as outlined right now? Any concerns per se? Because I don't want to continue down this path and then hear that folks might have a concern.
I personally was struggling with Newton, Mass, because I lived there, and I don't see a world in which somebody would come from there to here. Especially if you look at their
But
like.
yet, the former administrative services
I was gonna
okay, you go for it, Alderman
No,
Clemens.
go ahead.
The former administrative services director from Nashua is the CFO in the city of Newton, Mass. You could argue your current administrative services director lives on the Newton-West Roxbury line. So anyway, but
I was just, you asked if we have objections, I was just saying that was the one that just felt like a totally different community to me, but Alderman Clemens.
The only thing that I also want to factor into this, and I don't know how we do it, is how well run are these cities that we're looking at? Meaning, like, I can look at Fall River, right, and I can tell you right now, it's not a place that I would want to live. It's not.
fair.
It's not a place I'd want to go. So, I don't know how, I've never been to Cranston, Rhode Island. Rhode Island in general, though, does not have a very good reputation right now. It just doesn't. And so, we need to look at that as well. Where on the other hand, Newton is a place that, probably we really should be looking at, because that's a very well-run place. Concord, New Hampshire is, so I don't know to what degree we look at that as a comparable or how we could even get that sort of data.
let me
other
talk to
than-
Rachel about that, because I'm having some ideas right now, and I'm not sure whether any of these would be a good ones, but like, we could look at rating agencies, ratings, and just to kind of see maybe how they fall from a rating agency perspective, but your point's well taken, and I think we should have a balance ultimately. We should have some communities that maybe we want to emulate and strive towards, and then I think we need to also have some communities that we have similar demographics to. And, it's a combination of all the above. That's why we have 10 or 15 that we're kind of comparing ourselves to.
Yeah, I would just add, and I think that's a great point, we really focus on financial criteria and criteria that we can quantify. So if there was a way, and Tim and I can talk about that, to quantify that, that's definitely something we could look at. But I also think that comes back to, once we establish that pay philosophy, really making sure that it's keeping up with how you want Nashua to look, and making sure it's setting kind of that standard. But those are great questions and thoughts and feedback.
Which is the whole point of why we wanted to come here tonight. And, so this is going to be stuff that we work on over the next few months, and we wanted to have your input on this.
All set?
Great. Well, thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you, Rachel.
Thank you. Yes, thank you.
Okay. I don't think we did communications.
There.
There are none, okay. Application to license hawkers, peddlers, itinerant vendors licenses.
There are none.
You did really good.
I wrote it out.
Nailed it.
All right, appointments by the mayor.
I'd like to make a motion to recommend the new appointment of David Fredette to the Board of Public Works Retirement System Trustees with a term to expire December 31st, 2025, to recommend the new appointment of Jane Marquis to the National Arts Commission with a term to expire September 11th, 2027, and to recommend the reappointment of Amber Morgan to the Nashua Center for the Arts Board of Trustees with a term to expire February 14, 2025.
For the motion, is there discussion on that motion? Alderman Wilshire.
Thank you. I am so impressed with these three people. I mean, truly, Dave Fredette, we couldn't have found a better fit for that position. Jane Markey, I've known for, 40 years, is a wonderful, solid advocate. She is a wonderful person. And we all know Amber Morgan. She's done some wonderful things here in the city. She's a great person. She's energetic, and she gets it done. So I applaud the mayor for bringing forward these three candidates. I think they're all really, really good candidates.
I agree. Any other comments? All right, all those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? And that motion carries. Unfinished business.
There is none.
New business resolutions.
There are none.
New business ordinances.
O24-028, requiring food service until midnight for charitable gaming facilities that extend their hours of on-premises sales of alcoholic beverages to 2 a.m. I'd like to make a motion to recommend final passage.
Motion on the floor is to recommend final passage. Alderman Clemmons, would you like to speak to your legislation?
Yes, thank you. So it was brought to my attention that some of the casinos in Nashua, where we have allowed them to stay open till 2 a.m., are not offering food service to what we would consider to be a reasonable hour. And part of the issue there is obviously if you're serving alcohol to folks, we want to make sure that they have the opportunity to eat as well and to put some food in their stomach along with the drinks. So the idea here is that the city gave these establishments a privilege to stay open an hour later to serve alcohol. And, there's been some, not all locations, but some locations have had some issues. And so what we want to do is make sure that there's the ability of somebody to, get a dinner basically up to 2 hours before they stop serving alcohol. And so that's really what it is. I did run this by the PR person for Gate City Casino, and they have no issues with it. I didn't reach out to the other gaming facility, although I would imagine if there was an issue, they probably would have been here as they're pretty on top of stuff. So, but the reality is, if you don't want to do that, then you can stop serving at 1 instead of 2. And that's really your option. So to me, this is a good piece of legislation that hopefully I can gather your support tonight.
Alderman Wilshire.
So I support this. I think it's a great idea because you don't want people out there filling their bellies with alcohol and nothing else. But when you say food,
Mm-hmm.
how is that defined? Is it chips and, I'm just curious because I know that question will come up.
Alderman Clemmons.
The way that it's defined in the ordinance, and it's hard to define that, and that's one of the things that we had a back and forth with Corporation Counsel, was how do you define that? But it's basically their menu. So in theory, could a bar or could a casino do a limited menu from, say, 10 to 12 or something like that? I mean, they could do that. But again, then I think at that point, you'd have to get your feedback from the police department, you get your feedback from constituents and say, is this working? How do we redefine it? But I think this is like a first step. Because it is hard to define what a menu is, right? But that's essentially the spirit of the ordinance is you have a menu, you have to serve it till midnight.
Alderman Wilshire.
I know there are some restaurants that do have a revised menu, a bar or a late night menu or something like that. I was just curious how your discussion went and what came of it. So I will support this, for sure.
Alderman Senate.
Oh, thank you, Madam Chair. I also support this. I think it's a very well-intentioned ordinance. I think just a couple of more logistics questions. The first, there's not currently a requirement that an establishment only serving till 1 a.m. has to serve until a certain point, is there?
Alderman Clemmons?
I don't think specifically there is. There is a law, the liquor law says, and I do not know the specifics of this, so if I'm a little out of bounds, forgive me, but basically you have to have a percentage of food sales relative to your liquor sales.
Okay.
What that percentage is, I don't know, but it is definitely well regulated by the Liquor Commission.
One more, if I could.
Alderman Senate?
Thank you. My other question is more just in regards to buy-in. I know that there's only, if I remember correctly, 3 licenses in the city of Nashua for charitable gaming facilities. If I'm up at 2 a.m., something's wrong. If, do we know that the facilities currently operating in Nashua, they've all, I would assume, jumped on this opportunity that came before them a couple of years ago to serve until 2 a.m.?
Yes.
Nobody's doing things their own way?
No.
Okay. Thank you.
All set, Alderman Senate?
Yes.
Any additional questions? All right, if not, the motion on the floor is to recommend final passage. All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? That motion carries.
And O-24-032, amending liaison ordinances. I will make a motion to recommend final passage.
Motion on the floor is to recommend final passage. Alderman Wilshire, would you like to?
Certainly. I got a call from Deputy Corporation Counsel Leonard saying that she was looking at the language and that some of these liaison positions are not committees, but had been labeled as committees. So it's really just a housekeeping measure. I mean, you know, if you serve as the liaison to the Board of Public Works, that's not a committee, it's just a liaison. So she was trying to clean up the committee language. So basically, it's just a housekeeping measure.
Okay, great. Any questions? All right, motion on the floor is to recommend final passage. All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Motion carries. I'm calling for public comment, but there is nobody in the chamber.
You don't want to do table and committee first?
Oh, yeah, that. Well, there was none.
There is none.
Table the committee, there is none. Okay. Public comment, there is none. General discussion. Anybody? Remarks by Alderman? Do I have a motion? Alderman Clemmons.
Motion to adjourn.
All right, all those in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? We are adjourned at, what time is it? 8:12. Thank you, everyone.